So once again, very good evening, everyone, and welcome to the session. So from today onwards, we'll be starting with the revision phase for the coming June session ACC exams. So we will be starting with the topics of substantive procedures for today. Okay. So basically, when it comes to the area of AA, well, we know that there are some common areas which used to be tested for every exams in the AA. So, ഏതൊക്കെ common areas AA ക്ക് test ചെയ്യാറുള്ളത് normally? So we used to have questions from the area of audit risk. Then we used to get questions from the area of internal controls. വേറെ ഏതൊക്കെ മക്കളെ area? പിന്നെ reporting,
substantive procedures.
Substantive procedures. Any other areas? Which other areas? There will be questions from the area of ethics,
Ethics and
corporate governance. Corporate governance. So these are the main areas that will be tested as part of our descriptive questions, right? And out of which, well, we know that basically we need to focus much on the area of substantive procedures because we will be getting many questions from the area of substantive procedures. In addition to which, definitely we can expect questions from the area of audit risk as well as from the area of internal controls as well. And the reporting will also be tested as part of the exam. However, reporting will be only a 5-mark question. And when it comes to the area of ethics and corporate governance, we are not pretty sure whether that will be tested as part of the exam or not. But we can expect questions from that area. It's a 50-50 chance. So anyway, we will be getting questions from the area of audit risk, internal controls, reporting, and substantive procedures. Okay. All right. So once again, welcome everyone to the session. So from now onwards, we will be starting with the most important topic of the AA. That's the area of substantive procedures. So basically, when it comes to the topic of substantive procedure, well, we know that substantive procedures are the procedures that should be performed by an auditor. In order to understand about the possibilities of having mistakes in the company's financial statements, so we have studied about assertions. There are always possibilities that the claims or representations made by the management might be misstated. So as an auditor, we should always be testing the claims and representations made by the management. And in order to test these claims and representations, we will be performing substantive procedures. Our company management and the financial statements related to the financial statements എന്തൊക്കെ മിസ്റ്റേക്സ് ആണ് ഉണ്ടാവാൻ ചാൻസ് ഉണ്ടെന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. ഇത് ഓരോന്നും ടെസ്റ്റ് ചെയ്യാൻ വേണ്ടിയിട്ട് നമ്മൾ ചെയ്യുന്ന പ്രൊസീജിയേഴ്സിനെയാണ് സബ്സ്റ്റാൻറ്റീവ് പ്രൊസീജിയേഴ്സ് എന്ന് നമ്മൾ വിളിക്കുന്നുണ്ടാവുക. ഓ വി വിൽ കോൾ ഇറ്റ് as audit procedures. So mainly when it comes to the area of AA, you can expect multiple type of questions from the area of substantive procedures. So പല തരത്തിലുള്ള questions ആയിരിക്കും നിങ്ങൾക്ക് substantive procedures എന്ന് പറയുന്ന ഏരിയക്കകത്ത് നിന്ന് വരുന്നുണ്ടാവുക. First of all, there can be chances of having general substantive procedures. Then there can be possibility of having substantive procedures based on assertions. And again, there can also be possibilities of having substantive procedures which are based on scenario based. And again, under the category of scenario based substantives also, you will be having further 3 more classification. So first of all, on the basis of scenario, there will be substantive procedures which comes under general category. Then again, on the basis of scenario also, you can expect assertion specific substantive. There will be pure scenario based substantive as well. So a variety of substantives are there. So definitely we have to get a proper understanding about each type of a substantive procedures to properly prepare for the exam. Okay. So we will go through each one of the substantive and we will practice one questions from each area. Okay. അപ്പം ജനറൽ ആയിട്ടുള്ള സബ്സ്റ്റാൻറ്റീവ്സ് ചോദിക്കാം, അസേർഷൻ സ്പെസിഫിക് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ചോദിക്കാം, സിനാരിയോ ബേസ്ഡ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ചോദിക്കാം. സിനാരിയോക്കകത്ത് തന്നെ എന്തൊക്കെ വരും? ജനറൽ വരും, അസേർഷൻ സ്പെസിഫിക് വരും, സിനാരിയോ സ്പെസിഫിക് വരും. സോ യു ക്യാൻ എക്സ്പെക്ട് എനി കൈൻഡ് ഓഫ് ദീസ് സബ്സ്റ്റാൻറ്റീവ്സ്. So anyway, 120 mark question in the AA will be based on substantive procedures. In addition to which, substantive procedures can also be asked as part of your audit risk or internal controls questions also. So substantives is one of the most important topic in the AA. So definitely we need to focus much on this area. Okay. So actually I've already shared you one file based on substantive procedures. We have also discussed it in our regular session. In addition to which, you can also download it from net. So this is a file I have shared you with regarding the substantive procedures. And in this file, we have already covered a lot of substantives from each area. So these are the common substantives that will be normally be asked in almost all your questions. So ഇത്രയും നാളത്തെ എക്സാമിന് കൂടുതൽ ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻസിൻ്റെ അകത്ത് വന്നിട്ടുള്ള സബ്സ്റ്റാൻറ്റീവ്സ് ആണ് ഇത് ഓരോന്നും ഉള്ളത്. Okay. So what you need to do is to have an overall understanding about these sets of substantives is possible. Or if you have gone through any other set of substantives, that's also fine. But you have to create a clear picture on that to apply it properly to the scenario. അപ്പോൾ ഏതൊക്കെയാണോ സബ്സ്റ്റാൻറ്റീവ്സ് നമ്മൾ പഠിച്ചിട്ടുള്ളത് അതിനെക്കുറിച്ചൊരു ക്ലിയർ പിക്ചർ ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ മാത്രമായിരിക്കും നമുക്ക് സിനാരിയോയിൽ അപ്ലൈ ചെയ്യാനായിട്ട് പറ്റുക. അപ്പോൾ ഓരോ സബ്സ്റ്റാൻറ്റീവ്സിനെ കുറിച്ചും പ്രോപ്പർലി മനസ്സിലാക്കി വെക്കുക. So the first thing that we are going to do now, so we will just quickly brush through each of the substantives and we will discuss about the scenarios in where you need to apply the substantive. Okay. അപ്പോൾ ഈ സബ്സ്റ്റാൻറ്റീവ് എവിടെയൊക്കെയാണ് കോമൺലി നമ്മൾ യൂസ് ചെയ്യാൻ പോകുന്നതെന്നാണ് നമ്മൾ പഠിക്കാൻ പോകുന്നത്. Okay. So suppose consider that you have got a question specifying that it's a new client for the audit firm. Or it may be specified that the previous year audit was not performed. Or if the previous year audit was performed by some other auditor. In all these cases, we will always mention about the risk that opening balance might be misstated. ശരിയല്ലേ? കഴിഞ്ഞ വർഷത്തെ ഓഡിറ്റ് ചെയ്തിട്ടില്ല, നമ്മളല്ല ഓഡിറ്റ് പെർഫോം ചെയ്തേക്കുന്നത്, ഒരു ന്യൂ ക്ലയന്റ് ആണ് എന്നൊക്കെ പറയുമ്പോൾ നമ്മൾ പറയും ഓപ്പണിംഗ് ബാലൻസിനെ കുറിച്ച് ഓഡിറ്റർക്ക് നോളജ് ഉണ്ടാവില്ല, ഓപ്പണിംഗ് ബാലൻസ് മിസ്റ്റേറ്റഡ് ആവുന്നു. So if this scenario specifies about the fact that it's a new client and they are requesting the auditor to perform procedures in relation to this new client, then automatically you have to consider the possibility of using points in relation to opening balance. You can consider writing substantive procedures in relation to the opening balance. Then again, there can be chances that you might be getting a direct question in the scenario, and the scenario might ask you to perform substantive procedures based on bank. You might be asked to perform substantive procedures to confirm the bank balance. So when you get a question on substantive procedures to perform in order to confirm a company's bank balance, you should not write the by heart knowledge there. So by heart ആയിട്ടുള്ള കാര്യം നേരെ കൊണ്ടുപോയിട്ട് ബാങ്ക് ബാലൻസിന്റെ സബ്സ്റ്റാൻറ്റീവ്സ് എഴുതാൻ പറയുമ്പോൾ എഴുതി കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ മാർക്ക് കിട്ടത്തില്ല. Instead, you need to consider what is actually mentioned in the scenario. Consider that the scenario properly specifies that the auditor have not, that the client company have not prepared the bank reconciliation statement. So if the client have not prepared the bank reconciliation statement, as an auditor, you will not be able to mention that the bank reconciliation statement have to be reperformed by the auditor. Bank reconciliation statement client perform ചെയ്തിട്ടില്ല എന്നാണ് സിനാരിയോയിൽ പറഞ്ഞേക്കുന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ അത് റീകാൽക്കുലേറ്റ് ചെയ്യാൻ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ റീപെർഫോം ചെയ്യാൻ നമുക്ക് പറയാൻ പറ്റുമോ? പറ്റില്ല. പറഞ്ഞാൽ നമുക്ക് മാർക്ക് കിട്ടില്ല. Again, if it is clearly mentioned in the scenario that the client is not having an overdraft balance, then you are writing to consider whether there is any overdraft set of right. You won't get any mark because as the client have already mentioned that they have not got any overdraft, you're not required to write any point in relation to that. So always keep this thing in mind. So whenever you perform the audit procedures, you should always be performing audit procedures in order to confirm whether what is mentioned in the scenario is actually being tested. So സിനാരിയോക്കകത്ത് എന്താണോ പറഞ്ഞേക്കുന്നത് അത് ടെസ്റ്റ് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുന്ന രീതിയിലുള്ള സബ്സ്റ്റാൻറ്റീവ് പ്രൊസീജിയർ ആയിരിക്കണം എഴുതുന്നത്. So if you get a scenario, you need to try to write the substantive procedure which matches to the scenario. Scenario ബേസ് ചെയ്തിട്ടുള്ള സബ്സ്റ്റാൻറ്റീവ്സ് മാത്രമേ എഴുതാവുള്ളൂ. മനസ്സിലായോ? Is it clear everyone?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The next one, directors' emoluments. Okay. So while writing and studying the substantive procedures in relation to directors' emoluments, we have already studied that directors' emoluments are the payments which we make to the directors of a company. So you need to consider what all are the things that will be normally included as part of directors' emoluments. The directors' emoluments will consist of salary. What else? Fees, bonus, pension contribution, നോക്കിട്ട് പറഞ്ഞ മക്കളെ, retirement benefit, non-cash benefit, and compensation for the loss of office. So these are the things that will be included as part of the directors' emoluments. So consider that the directors' emoluments are directly asked by the examiner. If the examiner asks you to write substantive procedures in relation to directors' emoluments, you can consider writing all of these points. However, if the scenario specifies that the directors' emoluments consist of salary, pension contribution and retirement benefit only. Then in that case, what you need to do, when you obtain schedule of emoluments for the year, the split between salary, pension contribution and retirement benefit have to be obtained. അപ്പോൾ എന്താണോ സിനാരിയോയിൽ ഡയറക്ടേഴ്സ് ഇമോൾമെന്റ്സ് കൊണ്ട് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് അതിന്റെ ബ്രേക്ക് ഡൗൺ വാങ്ങാൻ വേണം പറയാൻ. Then again on the other hand, you are getting a question to write substantive procedures in relation to directors bonus payments. In that case, you should not include the first 2 points. ഒരു സ്പെസിഫിക് ആയിട്ടുള്ള സബ്സ്റ്റാൻറ്റീവ് ചോദിക്കുകയാണ്. They are requesting you to write substantive procedures for the director's bonus. So in that case, instead of writing the term emoluments, what you need to do? You need to replace the term emoluments with bonus. എവിടെയൊക്കെയാണോ emoluments പറഞ്ഞേക്കുന്നത് അവിടേക്ക് എന്താക്കുക? ബോണസ് ആക്കുക. Okay. So consider that, review the director's contract and ensure bonus are consistent with the terms of this contract. Consider adequacy of disclosure for bonus in accordance with applicable accounting standards and local legislation. Compare the bonus with the previous year bonus and with the expectation. Enquire each director to confirm bonus listed and complete, and you have to write in this way. Clear? Manslayo? Okay. So only if you get a point to write about the director's emoluments, then only you should include the first 2 points. On the other hand, you should consider using the other points. And again, in addition to which, you need to consider what all are the things that are included in the director's emoluments if the examiner asks you to write procedures in relation to that. Clear?
Non-cash.
Sorry?
Non-cash.
Non-cash benefit?
അത് എഴുതുമ്പോൾ നമുക്ക് ഇതേപോലെ പോയിന്റ് മാറ്റിയാൽ മതി. മോഷൻസ് ഉള്ളത് മാത്രം ചേഞ്ച് ചെയ്താൽ മതി. ലൈക്ക്
സിനാരിയോക്കകത്ത് എന്താണോ പറഞ്ഞേക്കുന്നത് സിനാരിയോ ആയിട്ട് ഈ സെയിം പോയിന്റ്സ് മാച്ച് ആവുന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ സിനാരിയോനെ ബേസ് ചെയ്ത് എഴുതാം. അല്ല എന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ നമ്മൾ ഇപ്പൊ തന്നെ ജനറൽ ആയിട്ടുള്ള സബ്സ്റ്റാൻറ്റീവ്സ് ഓൺ ബേസ് ഓഫ് സിനാരിയോ പ്യൂർലി എഴുതാനായിട്ട് പഠിക്കും. ആ പോയിന്റ്സ് വേണം യൂസ് ചെയ്യാൻ. ഓക്കെ. Then the next one is in relation to the revenue. So if you're getting a substantive procedures to write in relation to revenue, we can consider writing that directly. Then the next one is purchase and other expense. So before writing the procedures in relation to purchase and other expenses, you need to consider what kind of expense it is. Say for example, if it is an expense which is for the purchase of inventories, then it comes under the category of cost of sales. Then you should write the substantive procedures in relation to trade payables. On the other hand, if it is relating to an indirect expense, you need to write the substantive procedures in relation to accruals. അപ്പോൾ അത് ഓർക്കുക, ഇൻ കേസ് എങ്ങാനും നിങ്ങൾ എന്തെങ്കിലും തരത്തിലുള്ള ഒരു പർട്ടിക്കുലർ എക്സ്പെൻസ് നടത്തിയേക്കുന്ന ഇൻഡയറക്റ്റ് എക്സ്പെൻസ് ആണ്, ആ ഇൻഡയറക്റ്റ് എക്സ്പെൻസിനെ ബേസ് ചെയ്തിട്ടുള്ള പേയ്മെന്റ് എന്തെങ്കിലുമാണ് കൊടുക്കാനുള്ളത്. ഇപ്പൊ സേ ഫോർ എക്സാമ്പിൾ ഇലക്ട്രിസിറ്റി ബില്ല് പേ ചെയ്യാനുണ്ടായി, അത് പേ ചെയ്തിട്ടില്ല, അപ്പൊ അത് ഏതായിരിക്കും പറയാ? അക്രൂവൽസിനെ കുറിച്ചായിരിക്കും നമ്മൾ പറയുന്നുണ്ടാവുക. കാരണം കൊടുക്കാനുള്ള പേയ്മെന്റ് കൊടുത്തിട്ടില്ലെങ്കിൽ എന്താണ്? അക്രൂവൽസ് ആണ്. ഓൺ ദ അതർ ഹാൻഡ്, ഇൻ കേസ് എങ്ങാനും നമ്മളൊരു പേയ്മെന്റ് കൊടുക്കാനുണ്ട്, അതൊരു ഇൻവെന്ററി പർച്ചേസ് ചെയ്തായിട്ട് റിലേറ്റ് ചെയ്താണ്, അങ്ങനെയാണ് എന്താണ്? It's a purchase. In that case, we need to consider it under trade payables. Clear ayo? Okay. Then sales tax liability, you can use it directly. The examiner might be asking you to write the substantive procedures to confirm whether the sales tax liability of the company is appropriate. So you can use these points. But again, you should not write the same points directly. Instead, you need to make it purely on the basis of scenario specific point. We will study and discuss on how we need to do that. Again, when it comes to the payroll, earlier we have discussed the director's emoluments. So director's emoluments will be the payments which is paid out to a director. On the other hand, payroll will be the amount of salary that will be paid to the employees of the company. അപ്പം ഇമോൾമെന്റ്സിന്റെ പോയിന്റ്സ് നമ്മൾ എഴുതുന്നുണ്ടാവുക ഡയറക്ടേഴ്സിന് എന്തെങ്കിലും പേയ്മെന്റ് കൊടുത്തു എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോഴായിരിക്കും. പേറോളിന്റെ പോയിന്റ് കൊടുക്കുന്നുണ്ടാവുക എപ്പോഴായിരിക്കും? എംപ്ലോയീസിന് എന്തെങ്കിലും പേയ്മെന്റ് കൊടുത്ത സമയത്തായിരിക്കും. But you need to consider whether the scenario is specifying that the employee payments are outstanding. If the payroll expense are outstanding, then that will be an accrual. ഇപ്പൊ നമ്മളോട് സിനാരിയോയിൽ പറയാണ് എംപ്ലോയീസിന് സാലറി കൊടുത്തിട്ടില്ല എന്ന്. സാലറി കൊടുക്കാനായിട്ടുള്ള കൊടുത്തിട്ടില്ലെങ്കിൽ അവിടെ പേറോളിന്റെ പോയിന്റ് അല്ല എഴുതേണ്ടത്, പകരം ഏതിന്റെ സബ്സ്റ്റാൻറ്റീവ് വേണം എഴുതാൻ? അക്രൂവൽസിന്റെ പോയിന്റ് വേണം എഴുതാൻ. So you should always be having this confusion about which substantives have to be provided. There will be confusion between payroll and the accrual. If the payments are already made or about to be made, then that's payroll. But if the payment due date is already done and the company have not yet made the payment, then that's an accrual. Manslayo? Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Next one is relating to the provision. So if the scenario specifies that the company has a probable future cash outflow then they need to recognize a provision. Okay. But you need to clearly focus on the scenario. There can be chances that in some cases, the examiner might not ask you to write the substantive procedures in relation to provision. Instead, they will give a scenario which specifies that there are some legal claim against the company, and they will ask you to write procedures in relation to that. അപ്പോൾ കമ്പനിക്ക് അഗൈൻസ്റ്റ് ആയിട്ട് ഒരു ലീഗൽ ക്ലെയിം ഉണ്ട്, അതുമായിട്ട് റിലേറ്റ് ചെയ്ത് എന്ത് പ്രൊസീജിയർ ചെയ്യണം എന്നായിരുന്നു ചോദിക്കുക. So you need to consider that it's a probable future cash outflow. If it's a probable future cash outflow, we need to write the points in relation to provision. And if the cash outflow has become certain, which means if you have already paid the cash, in that case, it's an expense. But expense into substantives on that. On the other hand, if it's a matter that affects the company's going concern, then you need to write the procedures in relation to the going concern. മനസ്സിലായോ? അപ്പോൾ കമ്പനിക്ക് അഗൈൻസ്റ്റ് ആയിട്ട് ഒരു ലീഗൽ ക്ലെയിം ഉണ്ടല്ലേ, കേസ് ഉണ്ടെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ നേരെ പ്രൊവിഷൻ അല്ല, പ്രോബബിൾ ഫ്യൂച്ചർ ക്യാഷ് ഔട്ട്ഫ്ലോ ആണെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ മാത്രമേ ഇത് പ്രൊവിഷൻ ആവുള്ളൂ. ഓൾറെഡി പേയ്മെന്റ് കൊടുത്തു എന്നാണ് പറയുന്നതെങ്കിൽ അവിടെ എന്തായിരിക്കും എടുക്കേണ്ടി വരിക? എക്സ്പെൻസ് ആയിരിക്കും. ഇനി ഓൺ ദ അതർ ഹാൻഡ് ഇത് രണ്ടുമല്ല, കമ്പനിയുടെ ഗോയിങ് കൺസേൺ അഫക്ട് ചെയ്യുന്ന കാര്യത്തെ കുറിച്ചാണ് പറയുന്നെങ്കിലോ ഗോയിങ് കൺസേൺ റിലേറ്റഡ് പ്രൊസീജിയേഴ്സ് ആയിരിക്കും നമ്മൾ എഴുതേണ്ടി വരിക. ക്ലിയർ ആയോ? Is that clear, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The next one is receivables. See, I have already taught you assertions properly, right? So you might be getting a scenario and they won't specify about the assertions on the basis of which you need to give the answer. But you need to read and understand the scenario properly and you need to get familiarized with the assertion. അപ്പോൾ ഒരിക്കലും assertion ഏതാണെന്ന് നേരെ തന്ന് ചോദ്യം ചോദിക്കണം എന്ന് യാതൊരു നിർബന്ധമില്ല. പകരം നിങ്ങളോട് എന്തായിരിക്കും ചോദിക്കുക? ഒരു സിനാരിയോ തന്ന് ആ സിനാരിയോക്കകത്ത് നിന്ന് ഏത് അസേർഷനെ കുറിച്ചാണ് പറയുന്നത്, ആ അസേർഷനെ ബേസ് ചെയ്ത് നിങ്ങൾ പോയിന്റ്സ് എഴുതേണ്ടതായിട്ട് വരും. So we have studied the assertions with regarding completeness, existence, then accuracy, valuation, allocation, rights and obligation, classification, cutoff, occurrence and presentation, right? So when you get a scenario, you need to consider about which assertion they are mentioning in the scenario. അപ്പോൾ ഒരു സിനാരിയോ കിട്ടിക്കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ ആദ്യം തന്നെ നോക്കേണ്ടത് ഏത് അസേർഷനെ കുറിച്ചിട്ടാണ് ആ സിനാരിയോക്കകത്ത് പറയുന്നതെന്നുള്ള കാര്യമാണ്. ഏത് അസേർഷനെ കുറിച്ചാണ് പറയുന്നതെന്ന് മനസ്സിലാക്കിയിട്ട് വേണം നിങ്ങൾ സബ്സ്റ്റാൻറ്റീവ് പ്രൊസീജിയർ എഴുതാൻ. സോ നോർമലി വിച്ച് ഓൾ ആർ ദ അസേർഷൻസ് ദാറ്റ് ആർ ദേർ ഇൻ റിലേഷൻ ടു ദ ക്ലാസ് ഓഫ് ട്രാൻസാക്ഷൻസ്? ഏതൊക്കെയാ പി ആൻഡ് എല്ലിനെ ബേസ് ചെയ്ത് വരുന്ന അസേർഷൻസ്? What are the assertions relating to the class of transaction or the P&L? Occurrence, completeness, then accuracy, cutoff, classification,
and presentation.
So what do you mean by occurrence? And then occurrence പറഞ്ഞാല് what do you mean by occurrence?
A transaction occur ചെയ്തിട്ടുണ്ട്.
The transaction have actually taken place during the current year and for whom? For the entity itself. അല്ലെ, ഒരു ട്രാൻസാക്ഷൻ ഉണ്ടായിട്ടുണ്ട്, കമ്പനിക്ക് വേണ്ടിയിട്ട് തന്നെ ഉണ്ടായിട്ടുണ്ട്. കംപ്ലീറ്റ്നെസ് എന്തായിരുന്നു? ദി കമ്പനി ഹാവ് റെക്കോർഡഡ് ഓൾ ദി ട്രാൻസാക്ഷൻസ് ടേക്കൻ പ്ലേസ് ഡ്യൂറിംഗ് ദി കറന്റ് ഇയർ. ഈ പ്രാവശ്യം ഉണ്ടായ എല്ലാ ട്രാൻസാക്ഷൻസും കറക്റ്റ് ആയിട്ട് കംപ്ലീറ്റ് ആയിട്ട് റെക്കോർഡ് ചെയ്തെന്നാണ് പറയാ. ആക്യുറസി മീൻസ് ദർ ആർ നോ മാത്തമാറ്റിക്കൽ എറേഴ്സ്. വാട്ട് ഐ മീൻ ബൈ കട്ട് ഓഫ്? Transactions are recorded in the correct period. Then what about classification? Transactions are recorded in the accounting heads. And what about presentation? Transactions and events are appropriately aggregated or disaggregated. Yeah, as per accounting policy, they have properly presented it in the financial statements. These are the assertions, right? And in order to understand whether these are the points which you need to include in relation to occurrence, you must always consider whether the scenario, അതായത് ചിലപ്പോൾ നിങ്ങളോട് ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ അത് പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുണ്ടാവും that the auditor have already performed some set of procedures and they might be asking you to perform the rest of the procedures. To understand about which procedure they're mentioning, you can do one thing. If they are already performed procedures in relation to supporting documents, അപ്പോൾ ഒരു ട്രാൻസാക്ഷൻ സപ്പോർട്ടിംഗ് ഡോക്യുമെന്റ്സ് വെച്ചിട്ടാണോ മാച്ച് ചെയ്തേക്കുന്നത് നോക്കുക. If a transaction is traced to the supporting document, that will be occurrence. പഠിച്ചിട്ടുള്ളതല്ലേ മക്കളെ?
Occurrence.
Yes. Then how do we test the completeness?
Supporting documents to transactions.
Okay, we need to check whether any supporting document is matched to the transaction. If supporting documents are matched to the transaction, that will be completeness, right? നമ്മൾ പഠിച്ചതായിരുന്നു. Say for example, if a sample of sales is matched to the sales invoice. If sample of sales is matched to the sales invoice, then that will be occurrence. If a sample of invoice is matched to the sales recorded, that will be completeness. What about occurrence? If there is any sort of recalculations, or if there is any sort of comparing between a transaction recorded with that of a supporting document to verify the balance, that will be accuracy. And if the dates are cross-checked, and if something the auditor have performed in order to understand whether the dates of the presented transaction is appropriately treated or not, that will be cut off. If the auditor takes a breakdown of the transaction and tests whether these are included in the correct accounting head, that will be classification. And if the auditor checks whether a transaction is properly presented in the financial statements, that will be presentation. So these are the ways in which we will be matching the assertions to the scenario. So you need to properly consider what actually is considered from the scenario. So if it is a transaction to supporting document, that will be occurrence. If it's a supporting document to transaction, that will be completeness. Or if it is based on mathematical errors, or if the auditor verifies whether a balance recorded in the year end is correct, that's accuracy. If the auditor verifies the reporting period, that's cut off. If the auditor need to verify whether the transaction including the correct accounting head, that will be classification. Or if the auditor checks the presentation, that will be presentation. Then what assertions relating to account balance, which means assets, liability, and equity? What are the assertions? Existence. What else? Rights and obligations, completeness, accuracy, valuation, allocation, classification, presentation. Right? Yeah. Then what do you mean by existence? What do you mean by existence?
All the assets and liabilities to exist items.
Liability equity existing. Company mentions that all the assets, liabilities, and equity are appropriately existing. What about the rights and obligation? They claim that the company is having rights over the company's assets, and they have got obligations over the liabilities. What about completeness? They have included all the assets, liability, and equity completely, and they have recorded all the transactions properly. Accuracy, valuation, allocation, they claim that transactions are recorded in accordance with accounting standards and are being properly valued. Classification means, again, they are recorded in the correct accounting head. Finally, presentation means all assets, liabilities, and equity are properly aggregated and they are being reported in accordance with the applicable financial reporting framework. Clear? Okay. Then how do we check this? How can we confirm the existence normally? Either when you perform a physical verification, what do you need to do?
Sheet to floor.
Okay, you can perform sheet to floor, which means you need to match the
documents.
You need to match the transaction, right? Or the assets, liability, or equity recorded to the supporting documents, right? To confirm whether they are existing. So you need to check whether the transactions or the assets recorded in the books are existing physically, or in case of receivables and all, we need to match it with the supporting documents. And what about the completeness? Completeness.
Floor to sheet.
Yeah, it's floor to sheet. So which means we need to match the supporting documents, sample of supporting documents to the assets, liability, or equity recorded, right? അപ്പം എന്തൊക്കെയാണോ നമ്മൾ സപ്പോർട്ടിംഗ് ഡോക്യുമെന്റ്സ് കിട്ടുന്നത്, 10 അസറ്റ് ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ആ 10 അസറ്റ് ബുക്സിലുണ്ടോ എന്ന് നോക്കുക, 10 റിസീവബിൾസ് ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ആ 10 റിസീവബിൾസും ബുക്സിലുണ്ടോ എന്ന് നോക്കുക. What about rights and obligation? How can we confirm that? We can look at the documentary evidences, which includes the transfer of title or the title documents or anything. And to understand the obligation also, we can obtain confirmation from the bank or related things. Accuracy, valuation, allocation, we can recalculate, or we can understand whether the transactions are being recorded in accordance with the accounting standards. We can recompute it. Then when it comes to the classification, again, we need to take the breakdown of the account to consider whether the transactions or the assets, liabilities, and equity are recorded in the correct accounting head itself. Finally, for the presentation, we can verify whether the transactions are present in accordance with applicable financial reporting framework. Okay. And on the basis of this, we have actually studied the substantive procedures. And well, we know that when it comes to the substantive procedures, we have studied completeness of receivables, existence of receivables, accuracy, valuation, allocation, rights and obligation, classification, cutoff, occurrence, and presentation. So properly go through the scenario and consider what the examiner actually intends to ask you. So after reading the scenario properly, try to pick the actual requirement properly, then you give your answer. അപ്പൊ എപ്പോഴും സിനാരിയോ വായിച്ചു നോക്കി റിക്വയർമെന്റ് വായിച്ച് മനസ്സിലാക്കി എന്താണ് എക്സാമിനർ ചോദിക്കുന്നത് എന്നുള്ള കൃത്യമായിട്ട് മനസ്സിലാക്കിയതിനു ശേഷം മാത്രമേ ആൻസർ എഴുതി തുടങ്ങാവുള്ളൂ. ഓക്കെ. The next one, the inventory, which is the most important one. Well, we know that. Which all are the substantive we have studied in relation to the inventory? Inventory at basic നമ്മൾ എന്തൊക്കെ substantives ആണ് പഠിച്ചത്? First of all, assertion specific, right? We have studied inventories, assertion specific point, which means we have studied the completeness of the inventory, rights and obligation, existence, occurrence and rights and obligation, cutoff, accuracy, valuation, allocation, classification. What else in relation to the inventory? Before the inventory count, then
After the inventory count.
During the inventory count, after the inventory count, then what else? Okay, standard costing, then inventory held with third party, right? Inventory held with third party, then finally continuous inventory count, right? Continuous inventory count. So we have studied these many points in relation to inventory. A student who have not covered the area of inventory properly will never be having any confusion in this area, because for him or her, definitely inventory is just a set of few points. But for us, we have studied inventory's assertion specific points before the inventory count, during the inventory count, after the inventory count procedures, standard costing procedures, inventory held with the third party, and the inventory that we maintain a continuous inventory record. So if this scenario uses any of these terms, then you should give answers specific to that. Consider that the examiner asks you to perform substantive procedures in order to confirm the valuation of inventory. So if they have asked for the valuation of inventory, these are the points in relation to inventory's assertion specific, which means you need to write the procedures in relation to the valuation of the inventory according to the scenario. Then suppose if it is mentioned in the scenario that the inventory count is about to take place, or the inventory count is planned to take place 2 weeks from now, and the examiner is asking you to perform the procedures in relation to the inventory count. So in that case, what do you need to write? You need to write about the procedures that you need to perform before the inventory count. Consider that if it is mentioned in the scenario that the inventory count is taking place currently, in that case, you need to write the points in relation to during the inventory count. Okay. Again, if it is mentioned in the scenario that the inventory count have already taken place in the prior week, and now you're going to perform the procedures in relation to the inventory, then you need to mention about the procedures relating to after the inventory count. So if it is clearly mentioned in the scenario that some or many of the inventory is held in the company's third party warehouse, then you need to write procedures in relation to inventory held with third parties. If it is mentioned that the company is recording inventory at standard cost, then you need to write the points in relation to standard costing. Above all, if it is mentioned in the scenario properly at a point that company is maintaining continuous inventory count or perpetual inventory count, then none of the other points are valid. Instead, you need to write proper procedures relating to continuous inventory count. അപ്പോൾ എന്താണ് സിനാരിയോയിൽ ചോദിക്കുന്നത് അതിനനുസരിച്ച് എഴുതാവുള്ളൂ. എന്താണ് ചോദിക്കുന്നത് എന്നുള്ളത് പ്രോപ്പർലി റെഫർ ചെയ്ത് സിനാരിയോക്കകത്ത് എന്താണ് പറയുന്നത് എന്നുള്ളത് കൃത്യമായിട്ട് മനസ്സിലാക്കുക. On the basis of which you need to write the procedures. Is that clear, everyone? Is that clear?
Yes, sir. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Then, Makla, you need to consider one thing, that whenever you write substantive procedures, say, always focus on what the examiner is actually intending to ask you. Sometimes it may be mentioned that the company is recording inventory at standard costing, and the inventory is held at the third party location. So in that case, what do you need to do? You need to write a mix of standard costing and inventory held at third party locations point. Clear? It may be mentioned that the company's inventory count have already taken place and the company is recording inventory at standard cost. Then you need to write a mix of after the inventory count and standard costing related point. Again, it may be mentioned that company is maintaining continuous inventory record, and they may be mentioning that inventory is recorded standard cost. In that case, you need to make a mix of continuous inventory count and standard costing point. So the examiner can demand from you even a mix of scenario as well. So you need to consider the possibility of that also. So always keep in mind, as of now, we have already studied. Still, there can be chances of having many points, but we have tried to cover maximum points as possible in relation to the inventory count and relating to inventory. So we have got mainly list of 7 points plus assertion specific points. So whenever you get a scenario, you need to focus on and try to get a good picture on what the examiner is actually intending to ask you. Whether he is actually asking you about the assertion specific point, or before the inventory count, during the count, after the count, standard costing, third party inventory, continuous inventory count. Just consider what the examiner actually demands from you. Then you give the answer. ഒരിക്കലും കണ്ണും പൂട്ടി ആൻസർ ചെയ്തരുത്. ഇത്രയും കാര്യങ്ങൾ ഉണ്ട് എന്നുള്ള കൺഫ്യൂഷൻ മൈൻഡിൽ ഉണ്ടാവണേ. ഈ കൺഫ്യൂഷൻ ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ പേടിക്കാനില്ല, കാരണം നമുക്ക് അത്രയും കാര്യം അറിയാം, അതുകൊണ്ടാണ് ഉണ്ടാവുന്നത്. Then you give the answer. Okay. Then the next one is relating to trade payables, whereby the examiner might be asking you some set of specific point in relation to the assertions when it comes to trade payables. And the cost of sale and the trade payables will be the same. And when it comes to the trade receivables, the most important assertion the trade receivables will be the existence. When it comes to trade payables, the most important assertion will be completeness. When it comes to inventory, one of the most important assertion will be the valuation. Okay, so keep that one in mind. For the trade payables, it's completeness. For the receivables, it will be existence, and for the inventory, it will be valuation assertion. Okay, tangible non-current assets. So we have studied multiple points in relation to tangible non-current assets as well. We have studied the points in relation to completeness, existence, valuation, rights and obligation. Consider that the company have purchased some of the new non-current asset. We have studied the points in relation to addition of non-current asset. We have studied points relating to self-constructed asset. Consider that a company is preparing one of the asset for their own use. They self-manufactures an asset, then that's a self-constructed asset. Company have disposed of, or company have sold some of their assets. The company is required. The company is requiring the auditor to perform valuation of their depreciation. Then the company have revalued some of their PP. In all this situation, the procedures will vary. So you need to clearly pick from the scenario about what the examiner intends to ask you. Let me ask you first of all, consider that the examiner is mentioning that you need to perform the procedures in relation to valuation of a playground. Okay, not a playground, valuation of a building. Okay, perform substantive procedures in order to verify the valuation of a building. So what's the substantive procedure you need to include in that case? ഏത് substantive procedure ആയിരിക്കും മക്കളെ കേസിൽ പറയേണ്ടത്? വാല്യുവേഷൻ ഓഫ് ബിൽഡിംഗ് ആണ് ചോദിച്ചേക്കുന്നത്. ഏത് സബ്സ്റ്റാൻറ്റീവ് പ്രൊസീജിയർ പറയേണ്ടത്? ജനറൽ ആണോ, അസേർഷൻ സ്പെസിഫിക് ആണോ, വേറെ ഏതിലാണോ? ഏതിന്റെയാ പറയേണ്ടത് അവിടെ? വാല്യുവേഷൻ ഓഫ് ബിൽഡിംഗ് ഏതാ? ഉറപ്പാണോ? എല്ലാവരും ഒന്ന് റെസ്പോണ്ട് ചെയ്തേ, പറഞ്ഞു തെറ്റിച്ചോ? നോ ഇഷ്യൂസ്. What you need to write in that case when the examiner asks you to write the procedures in relation to the valuation of the inventory? What are the substantive procedures need to be included by the auditor in that case? Is that valuation of PP? Very sure.
Valuation of inventory.
There can be chances for that as well, right? It can be valuation of inventory. You need to consider what kind of business the company is involved in. Consider that if it is a construction related company, if the company's primary course of business is the construction of building, then for them building is an inventory. Then you need to write the substantive procedures in relation to the valuation of inventory. Or on the other hand, if it's a company which performs the any other business and they are actually purchasing one of their company asset, a fixed asset, in that case that particular building will be a PP. Then you need to write the substantive procedures in relation to PP in that case. അപ്പൊ സബ്സ്റ്റാൻറ്റീവ് പ്രൊസീജിയേഴ്സ് അങ്ങനെ മാറിക്കൊണ്ടിരിക്കാം. അപ്പൊ സിനാരിയോ പ്രോപ്പർലി വായിച്ച് മനസ്സിലാക്കണം. കമ്പനിയുടെ ബിസിനസ് എന്താണെന്ന് നോക്കണം. കമ്പനിയുടെ ബിസിനസ് പ്രോപ്പർട്ടി മാനേജ്മെന്റ് ആണ്, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒരു ബിൽഡിംഗ് വാങ്ങി വിൽക്കുന്നതാണ്, കൺസ്ട്രക്ഷൻ ബിസിനസ് ആണ്, അങ്ങനെയാണെങ്കിൽ അവരെ സംബന്ധിച്ച് ഇൻവെന്ററി ആണ്. ഇൻവെന്ററിയുടെ സബ്സ്റ്റാൻറ്റീവ് പ്രൊസീജിയേഴ്സ് ആണ് എഴുതാൻ. ഓൺ ദ അതർ ഹാൻഡ്, when it comes to a business where the company is involved in some other trade and it's not their principal course of activity, our situation, the particular asset the company bought or sold will be an inventory, will be a PPE. So you need to write the substantive procedures in relation to the valuation of PPE. So the substantive procedures for the PPE and the inventory valuation is entirely different, right? When the accounting treatment is different, because we know that PPE will be valued as per IAS 16 and the inventory will be valued as per IAS 2. So the treatment itself is entirely different. So to get a proper grip on that, what you need to do, you need to compare both, and you need to clearly get a picture on what the examiner demands you and write the answer. Clear? Again, if it in the scenario, if it is mentioned that company have purchased one of the new asset, you need to consider whether they have actually purchased in that asset or they have self-constructed that. If they have purchased it, write the points in relation to addition of asset. And if they have self-constructed it, then you have to write the points in relation to self-construction of assets. Then consider that the company have taken a loan for a long-term period, like which need to be repaid over the 5-year period. Then if the company have taken a loan which need to be repaid over a significant period, then it might be substantive procedures in relation to non-current liabilities. Then you need to consider the possibility of having intangible assets in the scenario. If the company have acquired any patent, copyright, trademark, brand name, anything like that, it will comes under the category of intangible assets. And if the company has spent on in relation to the points to when to prepayments, you need to consider about the expenses. You should always be having confusion between expense, prepayments, and accruals. So if it's an expense which is not paid, then that will be accrual. If it's an expense which is already paid, that should be prepayment. So you need to consider the scenario and you need to clearly identify whether a particular item is an expense, prepayment, or an accrual. As I mentioned earlier, if it's an amount which is already paid, it will be a prepayment. If it's an amount which is not yet paid, it will be an accrual. So that makes a difference between the prepayments and the accruals. The equity share capital can be a question. It may be mentioned that the company is listed and they have issued the share capital. So if the company have issued shares during the year, comes under the category of equity share capital. Then when it comes to dividend, the examiner might be asking you to perform the procedures relating to dividend itself. Then reserves also same thing. It may be mentioned that some of the uncorrected mistakes are there in the company's financial statements. Then you need to write the points in relation to uncorrected misstatements. And overall review of financial statements is the same thing. It may be mentioned that the company is reviewing the company's financial statements for the first time, or at the conclusion stage of audit, the auditor is performing the overall review of FS, and you can include these set of points. And for the software procedures, computer-assisted auditing techniques can be considered. They might be asking you to perform procedures by using computer-assisted auditing techniques. Mainly 4 procedures can be performed by using CAT. You can perform analytical procedure. You can select a representative sample. You can recalculate any calculations which is already done, and you can perform the cutoff testing. So this is what you can perform as part of using computer-assisted audit techniques. Clear? Procedures. So we have already spent around more than a month on these procedures. We were studying only 2-3 set of procedures a day, and I hope you're revising it on regular basis. So these are the set of substantive procedures that we have discussed in our regular session. And now we are going to apply the substantive procedures directly to the scenario. Okay. So these are the things which you need to consider. So, well, as we discussed now, there can be possibility of having confusions between each of the substantives that the examiner might ask you. So definitely you need to have confusion, because if you have confusion, it means that you have studied something. Because a student will have confusion in relation to substantives area only if he know the fact that this substantive is very wide. A lot of substantives on which you need to focus on. Then definitely you can that you've got a clear picture on what is there to be learned in the substantives and study. And especially if a student is not having any confusion in the area of substantive, it means that you need to study more. So definitely consider spending much time on the area of substantive procedures, as it is one of the most important area in the AA syllabus. Okay, so we will just do one thing. We will start with the question. So first of all, we start with the question called dashing company. Okay, so it's a question. So everyone, please do one thing. Please read this introductory paragraph. Here, okay, till the financial statements. So it's 1st July 2015, Dashing Company manufactures women's clothing and its year end was 30th April 2015. You are an audit supervisor of John T and Company, and the year end audit for Dashing Company is due to commence shortly. The draft financial statements recognize profit before tax of 2.6 million and total asset of 18 million. You have been given the responsibility for auditing receivables, which is material balance. And as per the audit approach, positives receivable circularization is to be undertaken. At the planning meeting, finance director of Dashing Company informed the engagement partner that the company was closing one of the smaller production site, and as a result, a number of employees would be made redundant, and a redundancy provision of 110,000 is included in the draft financial statements. So what are the things that I mentioned here in the scenario? First of all, they have mentioned that Dashing Company is a company which is manufacturing cloth. Then they have mentioned that the company's financial statements is having profit before tax of 2.6 million. Total asset of the company is 18 million. And we will be responsible for auditing the receivables. It is a material balance. And they have mentioned that they have also performed positive receivable circularization. So in that circularization, what do you mean by circularization? It's an external confirmation. Okay, positive confirmation request, which they send to the customers. Then they have also mentioned that the finance director has informed us that they are closing one of their production site. Some will lose a job. So for which they have created a redundancy provision of 110,000. So that's the only thing that I mentioned in the scenario. അപ്പോൾ നമ്മളോട് വളരെ ബേസിക് ആയിട്ടുള്ള സിനാരിയോ ആണ് പറഞ്ഞത്. അവർ പോസിറ്റീവ് റിസീവ് സർക്കുലറൈസേഷൻ അയച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്. പോസിറ്റീവ് കൺഫർമേഷൻ റിക്വസ്റ്റ് എന്തായിരുന്നു? നമ്മൾ പഠിച്ചതാണ് തിയറിക്കകത്ത്. ഒരു കസ്റ്റമറിനോട് നമ്മൾ പറയാണ് അവര് ഈ ഒരു ബാലൻസ് കൺഫേം ചെയ്താലും കൺഫേം ചെയ്തില്ലെങ്കിലും തിരിച്ച് റെസ്പോണ്ട് ചെയ്യാൻ എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ് നമ്മൾ അയക്കുന്നതാണ് പോസിറ്റീവ് റിസീവ് സർക്കുലറൈസേഷൻ. സോ അപ്പൊ അത് അയച്ചു എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു. ഇനി നമ്മളോട് ചോദിച്ചിരിക്കുന്ന റിക്വയർമെന്റ് നോക്കിയേ. ഫോർ 6 marks, describe the substantive procedure other than a receivable circularization the auditor should perform to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence to verify each of the following assertions in relation to Dashing Company's receivables. Dashing Companyയുടെ റിസീവബിൾസിന്റെ ബാലൻസ് കൺഫേം ചെയ്യാൻ ഈ ഓരോ അസേഷൻസ് റിലേറ്റ് ചെയ്ത് സഫീഷ്യന്റ് അപ്രോപ്രിയേറ്റ് എവിഡൻസ് ഒബ്റ്റൈൻ ചെയ്യാൻ എന്തൊക്കെ പ്രൊസീജിയേഴ്സ് ആണ് പെർഫോം ചെയ്യേണ്ടതെന്ന് ചോദിച്ചു. They have asked you to write the substantive procedures in relation to accuracy, valuation, allocation, completeness, rights and obligation. Clear? And they have mentioned that there will be 6 marks for this question. For each of the 3 cases, you will be getting equal marks, which means 2 marks for accuracy, valuation, allocation, 2 marks for completeness, and 2 marks for rights and obligation. So how many points you need to include in relation to each of these? എത്ര പോയിന്റ് വെച്ച് മക്കളെ എഴുതേണ്ടത്? 2 points for accuracy, valuation, allocation, 2 points for completeness, and 2 points for rights and obligation. Is that clear? Clear ayo?
Yes.
Okay, fine. എഴുതാൻ പറ്റുമോ? Are you guys familiar with this? Direct question or indirect question or have they mentioned anything in the scenario relating to this?
Direct question.
Yeah, it's a direct question. They haven't mentioned much in the scenario. So what do you need to do? You need to write any 2 points in relation to accuracy, valuation, and location. Any 2 points in relation to completeness, and any 2 points in relation to rights and obligation. That is what you need to do. Our receivables in the padisa, completeness in 2 points then rights and obligation 2 points അതുപോലെ തന്നെ നമ്മളോട് ചോദിച്ചേക്കുന്ന വേറെ ഏതായിരുന്നു ഇറ്റ്സ് accuracy valuation location അതിന്റെ 2 points but you keep one thing in mind. When you write down this point, you need to match it to the scenario. കേട്ടോ അതായത് scenario specific ആയിട്ട് വേണം എഴുതാൻ. Whenever you write the points, include the name of the client. So when you write discuss with the management, you need to write it to the scenario specific. That discuss with the management of dashing company about the provision of 1.1 million. So you need to include the figure as well as the name of the company along with each of the point. അപ്പോൾ ഓരോ substantive procedures എഴുതുമ്പോൾ കമ്പനിയുടെ പേര് അതിൻ്റെ അകത്ത് എഴുതണം. Review the disclosures of dashing company. Discuss with the management of dashing company. Obtain external confirmation from the management of dashing company about this revenue of 1.1 million, about the total asset of 10.2 million. Obtain confirmation from dashing company's customers. Obtain external confirmation from the dashing company's lawyer. So whenever you write the procedure, you need to include the name of the company as well as the figure involved. Clear, Maklai? Is that clear? Okay. So this is the way in which you will be getting assertion specific substantive procedures. Okay. And the second one, describe the substantive procedure the auditor should perform to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence to redundancy provision. So they have asked you to perform substantive procedures in relation to the sufficiency and appropriateness of the redundancy provision. So is that a general point or a assertion specific point or a scenario based question? General ano, assertion ano, scenario specific ano? Substantive procedures in relation to redundancy provision. എന്താ മക്കളെ ഇത് ജനറൽ ആണോ അസേർഷൻ ആണോ സിനാരിയോ ആണോ
Scenario.
Right? Because they have properly mentioned here that the company is planning to make some of the employees redundant after the year end because they are going to close down one of their small production site, due to which the employees will lose their job and for which they have recognized a provision of 110,000. Okay, so we will study about how to write the general points. I mean the points based on scenario. Sorry, not general points, the points based on scenario. So tell me, what all are the things that you need to confirm here? ഇവിടെ നിങ്ങൾക്ക് സബ്സ്റ്റാൻറ്റീവ് പ്രൊസീജിയേഴ്സ് ചെയ്ത് എന്തൊക്കെ കാര്യങ്ങളാണ് ഈ ഒരു സിറ്റുവേഷൻ സിനാരിയോക്കകത്തുനിന്ന് മനസ്സിലാക്കേണ്ടത്?
Amount correct ആണോ അവർ എസ്റ്റിമേറ്റ് ചെയ്തേക്കുന്ന amount?
Exactly, good. So first of all, you need to know whether the amount of 110,000 അല്ലേ? You need to consider whether the amount of 110,000 is reasonable or appropriate. So you need to know whether it is reasonable. Fine, good. Then what else? വേറെ എന്താ അറിയേണ്ടത്? Create when you need to create provision. Exactly. You need to know whether the employees are informed about the redundancy. Okay, about the employees informed about the redundancy. So on the basis of which we need to know whether there is a present obligation for the company, right? Or probable future cash outflow will arise. Probable future cash outflow ഉണ്ടാവുമെന്ന് അറിയണം. Okay, what else? Commonly, വേറെ എന്തായിരിക്കും നിങ്ങൾക്ക് അറിയേണ്ടത്? What do you need to know?
ഇത് ഡ്യൂ ടു പാസ്റ്റ് ഇവന്റ്സ് ആണോ അതോ പ്രസന്റ് ആയിട്ടുള്ളതാണോ?
Present obligation ഉണ്ടോ എന്ന് അറിയണം അല്ലെ? Present obligation as a result of past event ഉണ്ടോ എന്ന് അറിയണം. So you need to know whether there is a present obligation. Good. Then what else? Finally, exactly, you need to know whether adequate disclosures are provided, right? ഇത്രയും കാര്യങ്ങളെല്ലാം നിങ്ങൾക്ക് മെയിൻലി അറിയേണ്ടി വരുന്നത്. So you need to know whether the provision is reasonable. എംപ്ലോയീസിനെ ഇൻഫോം ചെയ്തിട്ടുണ്ടോ എന്ന് അറിയണം. പ്രൊവിഷനുമായിട്ട് റിലേറ്റ് ചെയ്ത് പ്രോബബിൾ ഫ്യൂച്ചർ ക്യാഷ് ഔട്ട്ഫ്ലോ ഉണ്ടോ എന്ന് അറിയണം. പ്രസന്റ് ഒബ്ലിഗേഷൻ ഉണ്ടോ എന്ന് അറിയണം. യു നീഡ് ടു നോ വെദർ ദെയർ ആർ adequate disclosures in the financial statements also. Okay. So, first of all, see, whenever you get a question like this, you need to consider from the scenario about whether there is any possibility of discussing something with management in order to confirm something. So, ഇവിടെ എന്തെങ്കിലും കാര്യം മാനേജ്മെന്റുമായിട്ട് ഡിസ്കസ് ചെയ്യാനുണ്ടോ എന്ന് നോക്കുക, നിങ്ങൾക്ക് എന്തെങ്കിലും കൺഫേം ചെയ്യാൻ വേണ്ടിയിട്ട്. എന്തെങ്കിലും ഇവിടെ മാനേജ്മെന്റുമായിട്ട് ഡിസ്കസ് ചെയ്യാനുണ്ടോ മക്കളെ? Is there something to be discussed with the management? What you can discuss with the management? These are the things which you need to confirm. So, in order to confirm something of this, what do you need to discuss with management? Logically, ആലോചിച്ചിട്ട് പറ, എന്തായിരിക്കും മാനേജ്മെന്റോട് ഡിസ്കസ് ചെയ്യേണ്ടത്? The first thing,
amount of provision.
how can you know whether the provision is reasonable? Amount of 110,000 is reasonable. You need to confirm whether the provision is reasonable. What you can discuss with the management in that case? Exactly, the rationale on the basis of which the provision is determined, right? Or the assumptions on the basis of which the provision is determined. You can discuss that with the management, right? So, discuss with the management about the assumptions on the basis of which they have recognized an amount of provision of 1,10,000 in order to confirm whether it is reasonable. Discuss with the management about the rationale on the basis of which the provision is determined to consider or to confirm the amount of provision of 110,000 is reasonable and are in accordance with standards. Clear, Ayo? Is that clear? Okay. Alternatively, you need to know whether the employees are informed about the same. So, what you can do then? Discuss with the management about whether the company have informed the employees about the redundancy in order to confirm whether there is any probable future cash outflow for the company. Clear? Is that clear, everyone?
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Then, same as that of inquiry, we have also about the written representation. So, written representation are the confirmation which are provided by the management. So, instead of stating something orally, they will give us a written report. That is something called written representation. So, instead of inquiring with the management, you can use the point of written representation. Obtain written representation from the management about the assumptions on the basis of which provision are computed in order to ensure the reasonableness. Clear? Obtain written representation from the management about whether they have communicated about the redundancy to the employees in order to ensure whether there will be a probable future cash outflow for the company. You can write that point alternatively. So, upon discuss with the management parayam, allengil written representation point parayam. Manasilayo? Clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then whenever you get a scenario, you need to consider whether there is any external confirmation that you can obtain in that case. നമ്മൾ പഠിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്, external confirmation are the direct written response which an auditor obtained from a third party. So who will be the third party here? To whom we can ask about whether there will be a probable future cash outflow for the company?
Redundant employees, sir.
Redundant ആയ എംപ്ലോയീസിനോട് ചോദിച്ചാൽ എത്രയാണ് എന്ന് അറിയാൻ പറ്റുമോ? അതിൽ നല്ല ഒരു ലീഗൽ ഇഷ്യൂ വരുമ്പോൾ ആരോട് ചോദിക്കുന്നതായിരിക്കും?
Solicitor.
Solicitor or the legal advisor, right? Or the advocate. So, obtain external confirmation from the solicitor in order to confirm whether there will be a probable future cash outflow for the company, or obtain external confirmation from the solicitor about the probable future cash outflow in order to confirm whether the provision determined by the company is reasonable. Clear? Is that clear, everyone? Okay. Then, what do you mean?
Audio break ആവുന്നുണ്ടല്ലോ സാറേ, നെറ്റ് പ്രോബ്ലം ഉണ്ടെന്ന്.
ബാക്കിയുള്ളവർക്ക് വോയിസ് ക്ലിയർ ആണോ?
യെസ് സാർ, കേൾക്കാം.
വോയിസ് ക്ലിയർ ആണോ?
ബ്രേക്ക് ആവുന്നു.
Just a moment. ഹലോ, ഇപ്പൊ വോയിസ് ക്ലിയർ ആണോ?
ഇപ്പൊ കേൾക്കാം സാർ.
ഓക്കെ, ഫൈൻ. സോ അപ്പൊ നമ്മൾ പറഞ്ഞതാണ് എക്സ്റ്റേണൽ കൺഫർമേഷൻ. അപ്പം എക്സ്റ്റേണൽ കൺഫർമേഷൻ ആരുടെ നിന്ന് ഒബ്റ്റൈൻ ചെയ്യാൻ പറയാം? അഡ്വക്കേറ്റിന്റെ കയ്യിൽ നിന്ന് അല്ലെ സോളിസിറ്ററിന്റെ കയ്യിൽ നിന്ന് ഒബ്റ്റൈൻ ചെയ്യാൻ നമുക്ക് പറയാം. ഓക്കെ, then what I mean by correspondence? എന്തായിരുന്നു കറസ്പോണ്ടൻസ് പറഞ്ഞാല്? It's a communication between two persons, right? So you can always review the communication between client company and a third party or any other person in order to confirm something. So ഇവിടെ ആരൊക്കെ തമ്മിലുള്ള സംസാരം നോക്കി കഴിഞ്ഞാലായിരിക്കും റിഡൻഡൻസി പ്രൊവിഷൻ ക്രിയേറ്റ് ചെയ്യണോ എന്നുള്ളത് അറിയാൻ പറ്റുക. The first party will be definitely be the company. That's a dashing company. Review the correspondence between the dashing company and employees in order to confirm whether the company have made the redundancy announcement to the employees, right? Then on the other hand, you can review the correspondence between dashing company and the company lawyers in order to understand whether there will be a probable future cash outflow which might arise as a result of the redundancy. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. So whenever you get a scenario, you need to consider whether there is any possibility of having a discussion with the management about something to confirm something. You can obtain written representation from the management in order to consider something, to ensure something. You need to consider the possibility of getting an external confirmation from a third party. You need to consider the possibility of reviewing correspondence between two persons. അപ്പോൾ ഈ രീതി നോക്കുക കേട്ടോ. എപ്പോഴും മാനേജ്മെന്റുമായിട്ട് എന്തെങ്കിലും ഡിസ്കസ് ചെയ്യാനുണ്ടോ നോക്കുക, റിട്ടേൺ റെപ്രസെന്റേഷൻ എന്തെങ്കിലും വാങ്ങാനുണ്ടോ നോക്കുക, കൺഫർമേഷൻ എന്തെങ്കിലും ഒബ്റ്റൈൻ ചെയ്യാനുണ്ടോ നോക്കുക, ആരൊക്കെ തമ്മിലുള്ള കറസ്പോണ്ടൻസ് ആണ് റിവ്യൂ ചെയ്യാനുള്ളത് എന്നുള്ള രീതിയിൽ ആലോചിച്ച് നോക്കുക. ഓക്കെ, സോ ഇഫ് സംതിങ് ടു നോട്ട് ഡൗൺ ഒന്ന് നോട്ട് ചെയ്ത് വെച്ച വേഗം. Done? Okay, then the next one. Whenever there is a calculation in the scenario, you can always consider the possibility of having a recalculation. അപ്പൊ എവിടെ സിനാരിയോയില് കാൽക്കുലേഷനെ കുറിച്ച് പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുണ്ട് അവിടെ നിങ്ങൾക്ക് എന്ത് പറയാം? റീകാൽക്കുലേഷനെ കുറിച്ച് പറയാം. അപ്പം എവിടെ എന്തെങ്കിലും കാൽക്കുലേഷൻ. So is there any calculation mentioned in the scenario? Is there any calculation which is mentioned there in the scenario? Or you can recalculate in this case? Definitely the amount of redundancy provision, right? So you can mention about recalculate the redundancy provision of 110,000 in order to confirm the mathematical accuracy. Clear? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Then same as that. You can always have a analytical procedure. So what do you mean by analytical procedure? It is the comparison between current year or with that of the previous year, or current year with that of the budget, or current year with that of the industry average, or comparing any financial and non-financial things together in order to get whether there is any possibility of having unusual relationship in that. So in this case also, you can consider performing analytical procedure by comparing dash with that of the previous year or with the industry data. And in case of significant variance or difference, you can discuss with the management about the reasons for the same. So in this case, what you can compare with the current year or with that of the prior year?
Estimated provision with the last year provision.
Yeah, estimated provision with that of the last year. But you need to consider whether this amount is there in last year or not. So will there be any possibility of having redundancy provision in the last year?
No.
No, because it's a thing that happens in this year, right? The company is planning to make one of their production site close by this year, not there in the last year. So we cannot compare it with the previous year. So in that case, what you can compare?
History data.
Right? So you need to think logically. So consider that if it's relating to allowances for a receivable or allowance for bad and doubtful debts. So in that case, definitely you can consider comparing it with the previous year because that balance will be there in the previous year as well. But in this case, this balance will not be there in the previous year. So you can mention that perform analytical procedure by comparing the current year revenue, the current year provision of 110,000 relating to redundancy with that of the industry data. And in case of significant variance, discuss with the management about the reasons for the same. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then obtain the breakdown of expense in order to confirm that expenses in relation to dash have been included in the statement of profit or loss. So what will be the expense in this case? Probably it will be added as part of the operating expense or indirect expenses, right? And we know that provision is an expense. So what we can do, we can obtain the breakdown of indirect expenses, or if there is only operating expense, then obtain the breakdown of operating expense in order to confirm that expense in relation to redundancy provision have been included in the statement of P&L. Clear? Is that clear, everyone? അപ്പം ഏത് എക്സ്പെൻസിന്റെ അകത്താണോ ഈ ഒരു പർട്ടിക്കുലർ റിഡൻഡൻസി വരേണ്ടത് അതിന്റെ ബ്രേക്ക് ഡൗൺ വാങ്ങിക്കുക എന്നിട്ട് ആ എക്സ്പെൻസിന്റെ അകത്ത് ഇത് ഇൻക്ലൂഡ് ചെയ്തിട്ടുണ്ടോ നോക്കുക. You can use this point in any other case also. Say for example, if the company have taken a new loan, what you can do in that case? Obtain the breakdown of finance cost in order to confirm that expense in relation to the new loan have been included. Consider that the company have purchased a new asset and you need to know whether the depreciation is appropriately included. What you can do? Obtain the breakdown of depreciation expenses in order to confirm that the depreciation expense in relation to the new asset have been included in the statement of profit or loss. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Then consider that whenever a company have a discussion in the company's board meeting, definitely that will be included in the board minutes, right? So in order to understand whether a company have actively started the program of closing one of their production site, they need to recognize the provision. And to understand that, what we can do, we can review the board minutes. By reviewing the board minutes, we will be able to understand whether the company have started active program for closing one of their production site, which would result in creating a provision for the redundancy. Then again, agree dash expense to supporting documents. So if there is any specific expense, like agree, you can agree the expenses for redundancy to the supporting documents. Maybe what you can do, you can cross-check it with the post-year-end bank statements, because anyway the payment will be made after the year-end. So in that case, you can mention it to post-year-end bank statements. So in case of any other case, say for example, agree the finance cost to supporting documents such as loan documents in order to confirm whether the finance cost charged by the company is appropriate. Then we can review notes to financial statements in order to confirm whether the disclosures in relation to dash, disclosures in relation to the redundancy provision are complete, disclosures in relation to the bank balance are complete, disclosures in relation to the depreciation are complete. Whatever may be the case, you can use it accordingly. In this case, you can mention that disclosures in relation to the redundancy are complete. Clear? Okay. So these are the set of points that you need to keep in mind. And by using this set of points, you can write any substantive which might be asked in your exam. So, scenario wise, then you consider whether you can discuss anything with the management in relation to the scenario, whether there's any possibility of obtaining a written representation, whether there is any possibility of getting a confirmation from a third party, whether you can review correspondence between any two persons, there's possibility of recalculating or reperforming something to ensure the mathematical accuracy, whether there is any possibility of performing analytical procedure by comparing something with that of the previous year or industry data, whether there is any possibility of obtaining a breakdown of some expenses, whether you can review the company's board minutes, whether there is any possibility of agreeing expenses to the supporting documents, and whether there is any possibility of reviewing the notes to financial statements. Clear? മനസ്സിലായോ മക്കളെ?
Yes, sir.
ഓക്കെ, അപ്പൊ ഒന്നുകൂടെ പറഞ്ഞേ, എന്തൊക്കെ പോസിബിലിറ്റീസ് ആണ് നോക്കേണ്ടത് ജനറൽ ആയിട്ട് ഇങ്ങനെ ചോദിക്കുന്ന സബ്സ്റ്റാൻറ്റീവ്സ് എഴുതാൻ വേണ്ടിയിട്ട്? ഡിസ്കസ് ഓർ
Discuss with the
എൻക്വയർ വിത്ത് ദ മാനേജ്മെന്റ് ഉള്ള പോസിബിലിറ്റി ഉണ്ടോ നോക്കാം. പിന്നെ എന്താ നോക്കേണ്ടത്? റിട്ടേൺ
Return
റെപ്രസെന്റേഷൻ ഉള്ള പോസിബിലിറ്റി ഉണ്ടോ നോക്കണം. എക്സ്റ്റേണൽ
External.
കൺഫർമേഷൻ നോക്കണം. കറസ്പോണ്ടൻസ് കിട്ടുമെന്ന് നോക്കാം. റീകാൽക്കുലേറ്റ് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ റീപെർഫോം ചെയ്യാനുള്ള ഓപ്ഷൻ ഉണ്ടോ നോക്കാം. അനലിറ്റിക്കൽ പ്രൊസീജിയേഴ്സ് ചെയ്യാനുള്ള ഓപ്ഷൻ ഉണ്ടോ നോക്കണം. ബ്രേക്ക് ഡൗൺ ഓഫ് എക്സ്പെൻസ് കിട്ടുമെന്ന് നോക്കാം. ബോൺ മിനിറ്റ്സ് നോക്കാം. എക്സ്പെൻസ് സപ്പോർട്ടിംഗ് ഡോക്യുമെന്റ്സ് ആയിട്ട് മാച്ച് ചെയ്യാനുള്ള പറയാ. നോട്ട്സ് ഫിനാൻഷ്യൽ സ്റ്റേറ്റ്മെന്റ്സ് റിവ്യൂ ചെയ്യാൻ പറയാ. ഇസ് എ ക്ലിയർ പക്ക?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. So this is what you need to consider in order to write substantive procedures in relation to scenario specific points. Okay. അപ്പം നമ്മൾ ഓൾറെഡി പഠിച്ച സബ്സ്റ്റാൻറ്റീവ്സ് അപ്ലൈ ചെയ്യുന്നതിന് പുറമെ എന്ത് ചെയ്യുക? സിനാരിയോ സ്പെസിഫിക് ആയിട്ടുള്ള സബ്സ്റ്റാൻറ്റീവ്സും കൂടെ യൂസ് ചെയ്യണം ആൻസേഴ്സ് എഴുതാൻ. മനസ്സിലായോ പക്ക?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah. So we will go back to one another question. So now we will do the question number 240 relating to Jasmine Company. Okay. Question number 240, Jasmine. So just go through the scenario. Sorry, requirement number A. For 5 marks, they have asked us to describe the substantive procedure the auditor should perform to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence in relation to Jasmine Company's trade receivables. Jasmine Companyയുടെ trade receivables ആയിട്ട് റിലേറ്റ് ചെയ്ത് എന്തൊക്കെ substantive procedures ആണ് ചെയ്യേണ്ടതെന്ന് ചോദിച്ചു. So they haven't mentioned anything here. They have not mentioned any assertion. They haven't mentioned whether it's general or a scenario-based point. Nothing is mentioned. They have just asked you to write substantive procedures in relation to Jasmine Company's trade receivables. Okay. So let's do one thing. Let's read the scenario. So everyone, please go through the scenario. Substantive procedures in relation to trade receivables. That is what you need to do. Just go through the introduction paragraph also, because sometimes something might be there which is very important. So just go through the introduction paragraph also. Have you guys read that? Okay. Jasmine Company's trade receivables is comprised of a large number of customers. In the previous year, the audit team has undertaken a positive receivable circularization to confirm the year-end balance. However, the customer response rate has been historically been low, so alternative audit procedures have been undertaken. A decision has been made for current year audit, a circularization will not be performed. The year-end trade receivables balance is 3.9 million, and the allowance for credit losses or trade receivables is 410,000, and in the previous year it's 300,000. They have told us that company have already undertaken external confirmation which they have sent to multiple customers in the previous year, but none of the customers have responded. So they are not planning to undertake the confirmation for this year. Instead, they are planning to take alternative audit procedures. And they have mentioned that as compared with the previous year, receivables balance has increased, and they have also increased the allowance for trade receivables. So tell me what they have asked in this case. എന്താ നിങ്ങളോട് ചോദിച്ചേക്കുന്നത് ഇവിടെ? Existence. How do you get that?
Circularization നടത്തിയിട്ടുണ്ടെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു.
Yes. What they have done as of now, അവരെന്താ ചെയ്തു already? They were trying to confirm the existence because they are tracing transaction or the receivables balance recorded to the supporting documents, right? It's a sheet to floor or floor to sheet one, which is performed here. It's a sheet to floor, right? Like ഒരു transaction supporting documents lekalla check ചെയ്തേക്കുന്ന. They have selected some set of transactions and they were sending the external confirmation to confirm that. അപ്പോൾ അവർ എന്തായിരിക്കും ചെയ്യുന്നുണ്ടാവുക? ഇയർ എൻഡിന് അന്നത്തെ ബാലൻസ് കൺഫേം ചെയ്യാനാണ് നോക്കുന്നത്, എക്സിസ്റ്റിംഗ് ആണോന്ന്. So which means they have already performed the procedures in relation to the existence. So they have asked you to perform alternative audit procedures in relation to the existence. So have you studied the alternative audit procedures relating to the existence of receivables? പഠിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ടോ നമ്മള്? പഠിച്ചിട്ടില്ലേ? പഠിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ടോ? Yes, we have, right? Existence of trade receivables. പഠിച്ചല്ലായിരുന്നോ? Alternative audit procedures to be performed to confirm the existence. എന്തൊക്കെയായിരുന്നു നമ്മൾ പഠിച്ചത്? Review after date cash receipts of Jasmine Company by inspecting the bank statements and bank receipts documentation. Then examine the customer accounts and customer correspondence of the Jasmine Company to access whether the bank balance outstanding represents specific invoice. Okay, so again in this case, vouch amount of sales and receivables ledger to supporting documents such as Jasmine Company's sales orders and sales invoices. Enquire the management of Jasmine Company for the explanation of invoices remain unpaid after the subsequent one have been paid. You can write in this way. Clear? മനസ്സിലായോ മക്കളെ? Okay. And again, is there any point of analytical procedure you can write in relation to the figures which is mentioned over here? What you can do? Perform analytical procedure by comparing dash with the previous year. What you can compare here with the previous year?
Trade receivables.
Not trade receivables. I have already taught you that whenever you perform the analytical procedure, you should not compare a balance directly with that of the previous year. Instead, you need to take a percentage. What's the percentage available here? Exactly. Allowance for credit
Allowance
losses
for credit
as a
losses.
percentage of trade receivables balance, right? So perform analytical procedure by comparing allowance for credit losses as a percentage of trade receivables with the previous year. And in case of significant difference, discuss with the management about the variances for the same. Clear? മനസ്സിലായോ മക്കളെ?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Yeah. Then the next one. Let's go through the next one. They have mentioned with regarding bank balance. So describe the substantive procedures auditors should perform to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence in relation to Jasmine Company's bank balance. So just go through the bank balance now. Bank balance in a paragraph on the vice okay. Then just consider the substantive procedures which you need to perform in relation to the bank balance.
സർ ആദ്യത്തെ ഇതിന്റെ അകത്ത് റിസീവബിൾസിന്റെ അകത്ത് 410,000 എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് പെർസെന്റേജ് ആയിട്ടാണോ കാണിച്ചേക്കുന്നത് ഓൾറെഡി?
പെർസെന്റേജ് ആയിട്ടല്ല, അവിടെ കാണിച്ചേക്കുന്ന ഫിഗർ ആയിട്ടാണ്.
അപ്പൊ അത് കമ്പയർ ചെയ്തേക്കുന്നല്ലേ ഡെപ്റ്റ് ടു ട്രേഡ് റിസീവബിൾസ് ആയിട്ട്?
ഏതാ അലവൻസ് ഫോർ ക്രെഡിറ്റ് ലോസസ് ഓർ ട്രേഡ് റിസീവബിൾസ് എന്നല്ല അവർ പറഞ്ഞേക്കുന്നത്.
ഓക്കെ,
ഓക്കെ, അത്
ബാഡ് ഡെപ്റ്റ് എന്നാണ് ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുന്നത്.
ബാഡ് ഡെപ്റ്റ് എന്ന്. Done? Why so? So what they have mentioned over here, the bank balance and the cash figure included in the Jasmine Company's draft financial statements is comprised of number of bank balances, an overdraft of 5.1 million, which is the company's main current account, and 0.2 million relate to several savings account. The finance director has informed the audit manager that all accounts have been reconciled as at the year end. The overdraft of 5.1 million has increased significantly since the prior year. The directors have informed you that the overdraft facility, which the company requires in order to operate on daily basis, is due for renewal in August 2015, and that they are confident that it will be renewed. So over here, we know that directly relating to the bank balance, these are the points. And here they have mentioned in relation to the overdraft balance. So after reading the scenario properly, correspondingly, you need to write the procedures in order to confirm whatever is mentioned in the scenario. So the first thing, the bank balance and cash figure included in the Jasmine Company's draft financial statements comprised of number of bank account balances, an overdraft of 5.1 million, which is there in the current account, and 0.2 million relate to several savings account. അപ്പോൾ അവർ പറഞ്ഞു അവർക്ക് ഒരു ഓവർഡ്രാഫ്റ്റ് ഉണ്ട്, അവർക്ക് കുറെ ബാങ്ക് അക്കൗണ്ടിലായിട്ട് ബാങ്ക് ബാലൻസ് ഉണ്ടെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു. സോ വാട്ട് യു നീഡ് ടു ഡു ഇൻ റിലേഷൻ ടു ദിസ്? എന്തായിരിക്കും ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുക? They have got
കൺഫർമേഷൻ മേടിക്കും.
Okay, the first thing, obtain standard bank confirmation from the bank with which the Jasmine Company have done business during the year to confirm the year-end bank balance. Fine. They have mentioned that the company have got an overdraft of 5.1 million. What you can do in relation to that?
Legal setup
Okay,
of
what do you need to do? You need to consider the possibility of having overdraft set up right for the company in order to consider whether it will be classified in the financial statements appropriately, right? Okay. Then they have mentioned that the company have prepared bank reconciliation at the year end. What you can do in that case? Recalculate or reconcile the bank reconciliation statement in order to confirm the arithmetical accuracy, right? Then what else in relation to the bank reconciliation which is already done?
Reconciliation statement cross check ചെയ്യാം cash book ഉം general ledger ഒക്കെ ആയിട്ട്.
Exactly. Agree the amounts in the bank reconciliation statement to the cash book, bank statements and
General ledger.
in order to confirm whether it is accurate. Then what else? വേറെ എന്തായിരുന്നു ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുന്നത്? You can review the disclosures,
Register of
right?
charges.
Disclosures നോക്കാം. പിന്നെ എന്താ ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുക?
Register of charges നോക്കാൻ പറ്റില്ല സാർ. ഓവർഡ്രാഫ്റ്റിന്റെ
ഓവർഡ്രാഫ്റ്റിന് രജിസ്റ്റർ ഓഫ് ചാർജസിൽ വരില്ലല്ലോ. Okay. What else? Exactly. You can obtain satisfactory explanation for all item in the cash book, which is having corresponding entries in the bank statements, and you can discuss with the finance director in case if there is any variance. So literally you can use almost similar points which we learned. Why? Because the company have already done all of those. So if the scenario specifies that the company have not performed the bank reconciliation statement, will you be able to recalculate the bank reconciliation statement in that case? No. Instead, you need to request the management to prepare the bank reconciliation statement, right?
Yes.
Clear line?
Yes,
Fine. So this is how you need to write the substantive procedures in relation to the buying balance. Clear, I am applying? Okay.
Yes, sir.
So,
The next one, describe the audit procedures the auditor should perform in assessing whether or not Jasmine company is in going concern. Jasmine company going concern ആണോ അല്ലയോ എന്നറിയാൻ procedures perform ചെയ്യാൻ പറഞ്ഞു. So is that a general substantive scenario specific one? What's that actually? Is that a general specific one or a scenario substantive, scenario based one?
scenario.
Scenario based. So is there any uncertainty relating to going concern which is mentioned in the scenario?
Overdraft bank.
Overdraft 5.1.
It is mentioned that the company will be able to carry out their operation only if they have got an overdraft facility.
Overdraft facility.
And they have mentioned that the overdraft is for renewal in August 2015. They are confident that it will be renewed. So if the overdraft is not renewed by the year end, there can be chances of having uncertainty relating to going concern, right? Okay.
Yes, sir.
So what do you need to know in this case? എന്തൊക്കെയാണ് നിങ്ങൾക്ക് കൺഫേം ചെയ്യേണ്ടത് അങ്ങനെയാണെങ്കിൽ എന്തൊക്കെ കൺഫേം ചെയ്യേണ്ടത് rather than writing these points directly, what do you need to consider in this case? എന്തൊക്കെ അറിയേണ്ടത്? Number one,
Overdraft facility renew ചെയ്യുമോ എന്ന് ബാങ്കിന്റെ അടുത്ത് കൺഫർമേഷൻ.
okay, you need to know whether the overdraft facility will be renewed. Okay, fine. Then what else? രണ്ടാമത് അറിയേണ്ടത്, what if the overdraft facility is not renewed? Overdraft facility renew ആയി കിട്ടിയില്ല എന്ത് സംഭവിക്കും? Company will not be in going concern, right? So we need to know whether there is an alternative source of finance to run the company's operation. So alternative finance options എന്തെങ്കിലും ഉണ്ടോ എന്ന് നമുക്ക് അറിയണം. Okay, this is the main thing that we need to know, right? So how can you understand this 5 points in relation to it? What can you do? Just consider what you can discuss with the management about what you can obtain written representation, about what you can get external confirmation, what you can review the correspondence. Is there any possibility of recalculation, analytical performance, breakdown of expenses, board minutes? You can review the notes or anything like that. So is there any possibility of having discussion with the management here in this case?
Just discuss with the management about the future actions.
Okay, discuss with the management about the future actions intended to be taken by the management in case if the company have not received the renewal of the overdraft facility to confirm that the company will be in going concern, right?
Yes, sir.
Then what else? Is there any possibility of getting an external confirmation from someone here? ആരുടെയും കയ്യിൽ നിന്ന് external confirmation വാങ്ങാൻ പറ്റുമോ ഇവിടെ അറിയാൻ? ആരുടെ നിന്നായിരിക്കും? Exactly, obtain external confirmation from the bank
Bank.
in order to confirm whether the bank is willing to renew the overdraft facility to make the company meet their cash flow requirements to continue in going concern, right? Then is there any possibility of reviewing correspondence?
സോളിസിറ്ററിന്റെ കറസ്പോണ്ടൻസ് മേടിക്കാം സാർ.
സോളിസിറ്ററിന്റെ കറസ്പോണ്ടൻസ് വാങ്ങിക്കണ്ട, ഇവിടെ കേസ് ഒന്നും ഇല്ലല്ലോ. ആരൊക്കെ തമ്മിലായിരിക്കും
Bank
കമ്മ്യൂണിക്കേഷൻ?
correspondence with the management.
Bank correspondence with the management of Jasmine company, right? Review correspondence between the Jasmine company and the bank in order to understand whether the bank is willing to renew the overdraft facility for the Jasmine company, right?
Okay.
Then is there any other possibility? I've just scrolled it.
View the board minutes regarding with
Yes.
the discussion in relation to going concern nature of the company.
Exactly. Review the board minutes in order to confirm whether there is any difficulties that might affect the going concern ability of the company, right?
Yes, sir.
Exactly. Then what else from the points which you have already learned you can use over here? Perform audit tests in relation to the subsequent events, right? To identify any issues in relation to the overdraft facility which might indicate the ability of the company to continue in going concern. Then you can consider reviewing the post board minutes to identify any issues in relation to overdraft facility which might have further financial difficulties for the company. You can obtain written representation confirming the director's view on whether the company will be able to get the overdraft facility to continue in going concern. You just want to make a slight difference in the point. Clear?
Yes, sir.
മനസ്സിലായ മക്കളെ? അപ്പം നമ്മുടെ പോയിന്റ്സ് സിനാരിയോട് അറ്റാച്ച് ചെയ്താൽ മതി. യു ക്യാൻ റൈറ്റ് ദ പോയിന്റ്സ് ഇൻ സിനാരിയോ സ്പെസിഫിക് മാനർ. ക്ലിയർ ആണോ? പ്രോപ്പർലി? ഇസ് ദാറ്റ് ക്ലിയർ എവരിവൺ?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this is how you can apply this set of points to the general scenario. Okay. And finally, please do one thing. Please read this particular requirement and then this scenario. Describe the substantive procedure you should perform to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence in relation to above two matters. Just go through the above two matters. Done? Paijo? So what they have mentioned there? So they have just asked us a general requirement. Describe the substantive procedure you should perform to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence in relation to the above two matters. So the first matter relating to the PPE. In the past, K has received negative press report over the condition of its fast food restaurants, with comments suggesting that they are old-fashioned and tired-looking. Therefore, during the year, company undertook a full review of all its assets, carried out extensive refurbishment to the majority of its restaurants. The review resulted in significant amount of aging fixtures and fittings being disposed of, and significant amount of capital expenditures was invested in remaining restaurants. So what they have actually asked us, or what you need to write as part of the substantive procedure in this case?
Addition of non-current assets.
Addition of non-current asset. Anything else?
Disposal.
Disposal of non-current assets as well, right? So
Disposal.
there can be chances of having mistakes in this area. Many of the students might give some random points on PPE. Some of the students will write some general points, and some others will write substantive procedures in relation to addition of PPE. But they have asked for both the addition and disposal, right? Because the key point of this question is over here. It is clearly mentioned that during the current year, after performing review, they have disposed of some of the assets, and significant amount of capital expenditure was invested in. So which means there's a disposal of the asset, and at the same time, there is an addition of the asset. So for 6 marks, you need to write equal points for addition of non-current assets and disposal of non-current assets. Is that clear, everyone? Clear?
Yes, sir.
So the next one, is that a general point or a scenario specific one? The company have the company have raised finance through share issue. They have issued shares at a premium of 1.6 million. Nothing much in the scenario. Is that a scenario based one or a direct question? Scenario based or general? General scenario?
General question.
It's a general question, nothing much over there, right? It's a general question. So you need to incorporate the amount of share issue of 1.6 million and the name of the company along with the point. So we have studied the substantive procedure in relation to the equity share capital. You can write this point. And which of this point is the key one here? It's the split between share capital and share premium, right? So recalculate the split of proceeds between nominal value of shares and the premium on issue of dash company shares and agree correctly recorded with the share capital and the share premium account as the company have issued the shares at an amount of premium as it is mentioned over here. Clear? Is that clear, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Then rest of the points will be same. So this is how you need to write the substantive procedures. So if you look at the questions that we have already done, so we have gone through general substantives as we discussed just now. We have gone through assertion specific substantives, questions like dashing company. Under the scenario also there will be general substantive. Under the scenario there will be assertion specific substantive. The questions which we have done in relation to the dashing company itself, the one we performed in relation to, sorry, not the dashing company, the one we performed in relation to buying the receivables balance under the question of Jasmine company. Then the scenario based one, the one we done in relation to Jasmine company's provision, and the one we just done in relation to the going concern. So these are the total category of substantive procedures that will be asked for your exam. So I hope you've got an overall idea on what types of substantives will be tested in your exam. Clear ILRcom properly? Is that clear, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. So this video will be available in YouTube as well. So if you want to refer back to this video anytime, you can do that. And we will have discussion on other questions on the substantive procedures in our regular session immediately after the revision classes. So we'll practice more questions from the area of substantives. And the substantives question practice won't take much time, because if we have gone through the scenario properly and once we pick the substantive, then you can just write down the substantive by applying the scenario to the theoretical knowledge that you have. So you need to focus on learning the substantives properly. You need to keep on revising it, and then you need to write the substantive according to the scenario. So whenever you write the substantive, always ensure about which sort of substantive the examiner is actually asking you. So rather than just writing general procedures, try to always write procedures in accordance with the scenario. Manslaya ellarkum? Okay. All right. So please do revise this area and please do practice and write the answers in relation to the questions we have discussed in the session. And immediately this video will be available in YouTube. So please go through this video also if you want to have any further reference. Okay. So in addition to this, in the tomorrow session, we will be discussing the area of internal controls. So please do revise the area of internal controls before tomorrow's session and do ask me any doubt in relation to that. And definitely we will make sure that we have gone through all the areas of internal controls in the next session itself. Okay. All right. So that's it, guys. That's all for today. So please do revise the area of internal controls. And in addition to which, please do learn the area of substantive procedures and do practice maximum questions as possible. Okay. All right. So that's it. Thank you so much. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.